guys, welcome to the Breakneck Moto Garage. I'm Nick, and today we're going to talk about restoring carbon fiber exhausts. So we're restoring a 1995 Ducati 900 SS. The original pipes that came off of it look really tired. They've got a lot of UV damage. You can see here on the band where it's been protected how nice and clean the carbon looks. But over here, it's just worn and tired. So what we're going to do is we're going to recoat the carbon fiber with new clear coat. We're going to use VHT clear. We're using a satin. You can use a high gloss for that sexy carbon look. Our pipes are pretty damaged, so we're just kind of trying to protect the pipes and minimize how visible the blemishes are. You can see on this guy, he's not quite as shiny as new carbon, but there's no banding and it's hard to make out any blemishes. So that was the look we were going for. All right. So one thing I need to mention before we get started, it is very important that you're really careful with how much you sand. If you go through your clear coat, carbon has to be reimpregnated with resin via a vacuum process. If you go too far with the sanding, you will ruin your pipe. From there. So the first thing we need to do is we need to clean our pipe, get it ready to be sanded, tacked, and painted. So to do that, we need a couple things. So we're going to use simple green and a spray bottle with some water mixed 10 to 1. So 10 parts water, 1 part simple green, just so we're clear. And we're going to spray it all over the pipe, let it sit for a few minutes, wipe it down, wash it off, and our part will be degreased. Now, if yours is really gunky, clean it good. Don't just spray on it and be done. See how that does for you. Spray the pipe with your simple green mix. I find it's useful to hang it so that if you get anything inside, it just drips right out. Don't have to worry about water sitting inside the pipe, possibly rusting the insides. You can take a sponge and cut it down to a small piece. You don't need the whole thing. Use the soft side just to break up some of the dirt and gunk. If you have anything caked on, use the bristle side, but be careful not to scratch it too much because you're going to have to sand that out anyways. Now, I turn over the pipe to my wife to lay the masking tape because she's better at it than I am. She just very, very carefully tries to wrap it with a single piece of tape so there aren't any breaks for the clear coat to get through. She takes and she runs it right along the edge and uses her nail to fold the tape in on itself and cover the inside of the metal completely. This makes sure that there's no overrun on the carbon and that we get a nice clean edge against that metal. If you have overlaps or gaps, you're going to spray your clear coat all over the metal, or you're going to miss sections on your pipe if it's overlapping too much. So take your time with this and make sure that you do a good job. This is one of those times where prep really pays off, and the finished product will bear the resemblance of all the time you spent. So we've degreased, we've masked, now it's time to start sanding. I have 3 grits of sandpaper. Not all of them will be used for this stage, but you will need all 3. So I have 400 grit, 1000 grit, and 1500 grit. 1000 and 1500 are wet dry sandpaper, so we can use water with them later to smooth out the finish. That's kind of important, and you want to make sure you have the right stuff. Additionally, as we progress, I like to use a set of scissors and cut my sandpaper so that I don't waste it, because sandpaper's not cheap. You're going to need a tack cloth. I also cut my tack cloths down so I don't waste them. And you're just going to need a clean cloth to wipe any dust off initially. You don't want to use the tack cloth right after you sand because you'll just fill it up with junk. So you'll use just a clean cloth to wipe it down, and then right before you paint, you'll tack. So let's cut our sandpaper and we'll start sanding. I just cut a small square of 400 grit sandpaper, and this is what I'm going to use to pretty much do the whole pipe with. You don't need a lot. It goes a long way. Just make sure you dust it out, blow it out in between, because it does wear. What we'll do is we'll take some pictures after I'm done here that will show what you want the surface to look like. That way you have an idea of what you're aiming for. But you just want to go over it all real good. I like to swirl it, that way you don't get inconsistent lines all up and down the pipe. But when you're done, you're looking for a nice, cloudy, milky kind of look on top of the carbon. There's a lot of dust here. Okay, so now we are done sanding our pipe. So from here, I'll show you how to prep it for paint. We'll meet you right over at the paint booth in just a minute. So, we have our pipe in the paint booth. Really important protection. You need a mask. Even our lovely camera lady is wearing a mask right now. This stuff has really nasty fumes. You don't want to breathe it in. My paint booth has a filter and negative airflow. So, even with all of that, I am going to put on a mask now.
Okay, so, first things first. We're going to take our tack cloth. Now that our piece is hung, we're going to go over it with our tack cloth and just get any remaining residue off. Just go over it several times. Check your tack cloth. Make sure you're cleaning it out and not using the same area over and over. You want it to stay tacky. Okay, we've got our tack cloth, we're going to set it aside. And now I've lost my paint. This is Satin Clear by VHT, and it is for high temp exhaust. This is what you need. Rustoleum also makes a high temp paint, but I've used VHT before and I've had good results with it, so this is what we're going to do. When you start spraying, you're going to start off the piece and you're going to make really fast light coats. That way you don't get any bubbles or runs. So right now I'm going to go ahead and start painting. That's it. Just that one coat. Now, we're going to let it sit for a little while. And then we're going to bake it on with a heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun, there are instructions on the can as to how to do a bake on the bike. Our bike won't be running for quite a while, so we're going to go ahead and do a bake on with a heat gun just to get the coats nice and hard in between each one for sanding.
Hey guys, so now we've finished our first coat of paint. So what I've done is I've just cut me a nice small square of 1000 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to lightly hit it. If there are any runs or issues with your paint job, now is when you fix those. Now is when, if you had a run, you would just take your 1000 grit, or if it was really bad, maybe you'd pull out some 800. 400 is the lowest you'd want to go, and that would be like if you just had a horrible big fat glob somewhere. The other thing to note is if you have a horrible big fat glob somewhere, you will probably need a little bit more cure time on that glob. Otherwise, when you start sanding, it's going to burst open and it's going to be filled with fresh clear coat. So, you know, if you have some nastiness on there, give it a little bit more time to cure. Bake it in a little harder on those spots. That way you can come back with the sandpaper and clean it all up. So let's go ahead and get started. It's just going to be exactly like the first round of sanding, just a lot lighter. So we're just going to go in nice swirly motions. And you'll just see a little bit of discoloration as you sand. And that's all you're after, is just to knock it down just a little bit. You want to make sure you get in along the side and everything so that you get a good coat. One thing you'll need to keep track of is this sandpaper will go bad much, much faster, and it'll pick up a lot of small junk and it'll tear. And you just want to make sure you're watching the condition of your sandpaper, and when it gets bad, just cut a new piece. Okay, my piece of sandpaper is pretty much shot, so I'm just going to take my scissors and my sheet of sandpaper, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my next piece out and just keep going. Alright, so that's it. That's all we've got to do. Now we're just going to wipe it down, we're going to tack it once it's in the paint booth, and then we're just going to hit it with another clear coat. So we're going to do this exact same process of paint, lightly sand, clean, tack, repeat. We're going to do that for about 4 or 5 coats of clear coat. Now, if you have a pipe like this where it's kind of damaged and you're trying to hide some blemishes, but you really like that carbon look, what you can do is you can do your first 3 or 4 coats in this nice satin, and then hit the final coat with a high gloss. And that will really bring out a lot of luster in the carbon fiber. But ours will not show that luster very well. Instead, it's going to show some pitting and some dings and scratches. So we've just chosen to leave it finished as satin. So we're going to jump ahead, and the next set of steps is going to be polish, and it'll be beautiful. You'll see. So what we've got here is 5 coats of clear. We've sanded with 1000 grit in between each one. I'm pretty happy to say that I had no runs in my paint, no bubbles, nothing like that. However, there are a number of pits that are below the clear coat that were just due to the age of the pipe and how long it sat and the lack of care given to it over that time. and I really can't do anything about those short of trying to sand it all down and reimpregnate it, and I'm just not willing to go that far into uh, this pipe. So what we're going to do is we're going to sand it down with our 1500 grit sandpaper. I've got some water in a nice little spray bottle, and we're just going to keep it all wet and moving. We're going to swirl through everything, and then we're going to finish it off with some Meguiar's rubbing compound and Meguiar's polishing compound. We're going to apply those just with a cloth. I have an electric buffer. I used it on the original pipe, and I was not as happy with the results as I thought I would be. So we're just going to do it by hand. A little bit of elbow grease goes a long way, costs a lot less too. So let's get started. Okay, so we've gone over it really well with our 1500 grit sandpaper. So I'm going to take a nice clean cloth and I'm going to go over it. I'm going to dry it all off, wipe it down real good, and then I'm going to tack it again before I start using my rubbing and polishing compounds. So we'll just clean it off real good now. Luckily, we are pretty much dry. So we're going to let this sit for 20-30 minutes, just air out, make sure it's absolutely dry, and then we'll come back and we'll hit it with our compounds. So see you in just a few minutes. Time flies, right? It was like just a second ago in 15 minutes. Whew. It's crazy how that works. Alright, so we're going to take our rubbing compound, we're going to take a clean cloth, we're going to go to town. So when you are applying this to your cloth, don't put too much on, but don't be stingy. And what I like to do is go in and rub my cloth together and just kind of try and get it all over. Kind of thin it out just a hair. And then what we'll do is we'll take and we'll just go ahead and hit it. Just work it all around. And that's why my right arm is bigger than my left. So, give me just a few minutes, we're going to cut some more towels, and then we'll start with the polishing compound, but as you can already see, it's really starting to shine. So the polishing compound is just going to make that even better. So sit tight, we'll be right back. So wonderful camera lady has cut us some more clean cloths out of the old bedspread. So we're just going to go ahead and start hitting it with our polishing compound. So once again, don't go crazy, but don't be stingy. A little dollop will do you. We're just going to work that into our cloth, same as we did before. Just get it all nice and on there. Get a nice flat end. And just start working it in. And there we have it. A nice, clean, restored carbon fiber pipe. So from here, you're going to want to put it on your bike, and when you crank it up and it starts to get warm, take a wet cloth and wipe it down. Some of this polishing compound will come up, and it may smell a little funny at first, but just wipe it down and it'll be fine, and it'll stay nice and shiny like this. Go through every 6 months, spray a little simple green on it, clean it up real nice, take good care of it, and if you notice it starting to look a little worn, get in there and jump on it before it becomes a problem. This pipe has so much pitting in it that there is no angle where it's not visible to me standing right here. And it's just a lack of care over time. This pipe is extremely old. Most modern bikes are not going to have a 20-year-old pipe on them, so your mileage may vary, but if yours is looking a little tired, this is how you make it look good again. So, before you hit those comments and scream about the metal sections on the end of the pipe, you'll have to stay tuned for part 2. I'm Nick with Breakneck Moto Garage, my lovely wife Teresa. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Let us know what you think in the comments.